Rejected at the altar. She disappeared, carrying his secret golden sun. Chapter 1. The Shattered Chalice. The grand hall of the Alpha King's palace in Eldoran stood as a monument to both ancient power and fragile hope, its vaulted stone ceiling soaring so high that the echoes of footsteps seemed to rise and never quite return. Massive iron braziers burned along the walls, their flames fed by logs of aromatic cedar that released curls of smoke scented with resin and distant pine forests. Overhead, crystal chandeliers, each one a captured constellation of faceted quartz, caught the firelight and scattered it across the polished black marble floor in shimmering patterns that danced like moonlight on fresh snow. Stained glass windows lined the eastern wall, tall and narrow, depicting the great wolves of legend, silver-furred ancestors hunting beneath a blood moon, their jaws open in silent howls that seemed to vibrate through the very stone. Tonight, those windows glowed with the full moon's silver radiance, bathing the assembled pack in ethereal light. Hundreds of wolves, nobles in embroidered cloaks of deep indigo and crimson, warriors in leather harnesses studded with iron, elders wrapped in furs white as winter, filled the hall in concentric rings around the central dais. Their scents mingled in the warm air, rich earth from the valley packs, sharp iron from the mountain clans, the faint sweetness of night-blooming jasmine carried on silken gowns. Low murmurs rose and fell like waves against rock, anticipation thick enough to taste. At the very center, beneath the largest chandelier, stood Avalon Starfall. Her gown was midnight blue silk so dark it drank the light, its bodice fitted close enough to trace every shallow breath she took. Silver embroidery spiraled across the skirt in patterns that mirrored the constellations overhead: Orion's belt, the great wolf, the hunter's arrow, threads so fine they caught the firelight and shimmered like falling stars. Her raven-black hair had been left loose at the insistence of the high priestess. It cascaded past her waist in heavy waves, the ends brushing the backs of her thighs. She felt exposed beneath all those eyes, yet strangely powerful too. For the first time in her life, the weight of attention did not crush her. It lifted her. Because tonight she was no longer simply Avalon of the outer villages, the quiet Omega who mended nets and gathered herbs under open skies. Tonight, she was the fated mate of Alpha King Braxos Bonecarver, and the mate bond thrummed in her blood like a second heartbeat. She could feel him even before she looked up. Braxos stood on the raised dais of dark granite veined with gold, his presence a gravitational force that pulled every gaze in the room. He wore a tunic of deepest crimson wool trimmed in black wolf fur, the royal sigil, a snarling wolf head encircled by thorned vines, embroidered in thick gold thread across his broad chest. Leather bracers etched with protective runes encircled his forearms, and a heavy cloak of midnight sable draped from his shoulders, its edges brushing the stone steps. His hair, the color of burnished copper struck by sunlight, fell in untamed waves to his collarbones. He had refused to let the royal stylists tame it, claiming it reminded him of the wild from which all wolves came. His amber eyes, sharp, predatory, flecked with molten gold, swept the crowd with the calm authority of a king who had never known doubt. Until this moment. Avalon lifted her chin and met those eyes. The bond flared between them, warm and bright, a golden thread that tugged gently at her ribs. She felt his heartbeat echo in her own chest, steady and strong. A small secret smile curved her lips. He returned it. Brief, almost imperceptible, but real. Her stomach fluttered with something brighter than nerves. Certainty. This was the moment the goddess had promised her since she was a child, staring at the moon and wishing for more than a quiet life. The high priestess ascended the steps, her robes of pale gray shimmering like frost on glass. She was ancient, her silver hair braided with raven feathers, her face lined with the weight of 1,000 ceremonies. In her hands she carried the chalice of binding, hammered silver etched with runes of union and fate, filled with wine dark as spilled ink, and infused with moon-blessed herbs that tasted of crushed berries, star anise, and something wilder, something that tasted of the night itself. She raised her arms. Silence fell like snow. "Children of the goddess," the priestess intoned, her voice carrying effortlessly to every corner of the hall. "Tonight we witness the sealing of what was written in the stars before the first wolf drew breath. Avalon Starfall, daughter of the outer valleys, Omega of quiet strength. Braxos Bonecarver, Alpha King of Eldoran, son of iron and fire. The bond between you was forged by divine hand. Tonight it is made unbreakable." She turned first to Avalon. "Drink, child, and accept the path laid before you." Avalon stepped forward. Her fingers closed around the cool metal of the chalice. She lifted it to her lips. The wine touched her tongue, bitter at first, then blooming into sweetness that spread warmth through her chest, down her arms, into her fingertips. She swallowed once, twice, feeling the magic coil inside her like a living thing. When she lowered the chalice, the bond pulsed brighter, almost painful in its intensity. She offered it to Braxos. He took it from her hands. Their fingers brushed. Deliberately, she thought, and a spark raced up her arm. His eyes held hers for one long heartbeat, amber burning into emerald. Then he raised the chalice. The hall held its breath. Braxos stared into the dark wine as though it contained answers he did not want to see. A muscle ticked along his jaw. The chalice trembled, almost imperceptibly, in his grip. Avalon's smile faltered. He spoke. "Avalon Starfall, I reject you." The words struck like a physical blow. The chalice fell from his fingers and shattered against the granite steps in an explosion of crimson that sprayed across the marble like arterial blood. Shards skittered in every direction, glinting in the firelight. Avalon staggered. The bond, golden, living, unbreakable, snapped with a sound she felt more than heard, a wet, tearing crack deep inside her chest. Pain exploded behind her ribs, white-hot and merciless. She gasped, clutching at the silk over her heart as though she could hold the pieces together. Gasps rippled outward through the crowd. A noblewoman cried out. Warriors shifted, hands dropping instinctively to weapons they were not permitted to draw here. Braxos did not look at her. His voice, when he spoke again, was flat, empty of everything that had lived in it moments before. "You are weak, Avalon Starfall. The throne of Eldoria demands strength, unyielding, unbreakable. You cannot provide what this kingdom requires. I will not chain myself, or my people, to fragility." The words landed like lashes. Avalon's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the dais, nails scraping stone. Tears burned her eyes but did not fall. Not yet. Why? The single word escaped her lips, barely more than a breath, yet it carried across the suddenly silent hall. For the first time since the rejection, Braxos met her gaze. His amber eyes were cold, shuttered, the gold flecks extinguished. "Because the goddess was mistaken," he said, "or perhaps I was, in believing fate could override necessity." "Lie," her wolf snarled inside her skull. "Lie." But the bond was gone, severed so cleanly there was only an empty socket where it had been, raw and bleeding. Before she could speak again, armored guards materialized at her sides. Iron gauntlets clamped around her upper arms, bruising through silk. She twisted, trying to look back at Braxos, but they dragged her backward down the steps. "Treasons!" one of the king's advisors shouted from the side of the dais. Lord Vesper, tall and narrow, his pale face flushed with triumph. "The Omega poisoned the royal well. Evidence was found in her chambers, a vial of nightshade extract. A vial was thrust forward on a velvet cushion. Small, dark glass, its contents gleaming venom green under torchlight. Avalon stared at it in disbelief. I have never seen that before. Silence, Vesper snapped. The proof is irrefutable. The trial, if it could be called that, unfolded in minutes. Witnesses were called, their testimonies rehearsed and clipped. No one spoke in her defense. No one dared. Braxos stood motionless on the dais, arms crossed, face carved from granite. The high priestess tried once. The bond was true. The goddess does not err. Braxos cut her off with a single raised hand. The goddess grants gifts. She does not force them upon us. Sentence came swiftly. Exile, the king pronounced, voice ringing through the hall. To the frozen wasteland. Let the ice judge what remains of her. The guards hauled her toward the massive double doors at the far end of the hall. Avalon fought, silently, fiercely, digging her heels into marble until her slippers shredded. She twisted to look back one final time. Braxos had not moved. He watched her go with eyes that betrayed nothing. No regret, no pain, no flicker of the warmth that had once lived there. The doors slammed shut behind her. They stripped her in the antechamber, ripped the midnight gown away, tore the silver embroidery from her hair, left her in nothing but a thin linen shift that clung to her skin like damp mist. Iron manacles encircled her wrists. Chains clinked with every movement. Outside the palace walls, the wind howled. They marched her through the lower gates, past rows of silent guards whose eyes slid away in shame or fear. Snow had begun to fall, fat, heavy flakes that melted on her bare shoulders and ran in icy rivulets down her back. At the edge of the city, where cobbled streets gave way to frozen tundra, the guards shoved her forward. Go, one muttered, almost apologetically. Don't look back. Avalon stood trembling in the wind, arms wrapped around herself. The lights of the palace twinkled in the distance, warm, unreachable. She took one step, then another. Behind her, the gates clanged shut with finality. She walked into the white. The cold sank claws into her flesh immediately, stealing breath, numbing fingers. Snow stung her cheeks like glass shards. The wind screamed in her ears, carrying away any sound she might have made. Miles stretched ahead, endless, blinding white under a sky the color of bruised steel. She stumbled once, twice. Her bare feet broke through crusts of ice, slicing skin. Blood welled, froze almost instantly. Still she walked, because stopping meant death. And somewhere, deep inside the hollow where the mate bond had lived, a faint warmth flickered. Small, insistent, alive. She pressed a shaking hand to her abdomen. A spark answered, golden, fragile, defiant. Avalon lifted her face to the storm and kept walking. The frozen wasteland waited. Chapter 2. Into the White Abyss. The storm swallowed Avalon the moment the palace gates clanged shut behind her. Wind roared down from the north like a living thing, thick with ice crystals that struck her bare arms and face with the force of thrown gravel. Each flake that landed on her exposed skin melted instantly from body heat, then refroze into tiny, stinging beads of ice that clung and multiplied. The linen shift, once soft and pale, turned stiff and heavy within minutes, plastered to her body by the wet cold. She wrapped her arms around her torso, fingers digging into her own ribs as though she could hold warmth inside by sheer will. The path out of Eldoria quickly vanished. What had been a well-trodden trade road became nothing more than a vague depression in the snow, then nothing at all. She walked by instinct, keeping the faint glow of the city lights at her back until even that disappeared behind swirling white curtains. The world narrowed to the next step, then the next. Her bare feet sank into drifts that sometimes reached her knees, sometimes her thighs. The crust on top cracked under her weight with sharp, brittle sounds, and fresh powder rushed in to fill the holes, numbing her toes almost immediately. She counted her breaths to stay focused. In. 1, 2. Out. In. 3, 4. Out. The rhythm kept panic at bay, though it crouched very close, waiting for her to falter. The cold was not merely uncomfortable, it was invasive. It seeped through skin and muscle, seeking bone. Her teeth chattered so violently her jaw ached. Shivers racked her in waves, violent enough to make her stumble. Each time she fell, snow cushioned the impact, but getting up again required more strength than the last time. Her fingers had gone from tingling to numb to strangely warm, a dangerous sign she recognized from childhood stories of hunters lost in blizzards. She refused to think about Braxos, not the way his amber eyes had gone flat and distant, not the way the bond had torn free with a physical snap she still felt echoing in her chest like a broken rib, not the way he had stood motionless on the dais while they dragged her away. If she let those images surface, the tears would come, and tears would freeze on her lashes, sealing her eyes shut. Survival first. Grief could wait. Hours passed, or minutes. Time lost meaning in the endless white. The moon rode high overhead, a pale disk behind racing clouds, offering no warmth but enough light to keep her from walking straight into a crevasse. She found herself climbing a low rise without realizing it, legs burning, lungs raw from breathing air that felt like swallowing shards of glass. At the crest she paused, swaying. Below stretched a shallow valley, snow unbroken except for the dark shapes of stunted pines bent double by wind. She started down the slope, and her foot caught on something hidden. She pitched forward. The fall was short but brutal. She tumbled, snow filling her mouth and nose, arms flailing. When she stopped rolling, she lay half-buried, face down, the wind knocked out of her. For a long moment she simply lay there, cheek pressed to ice, listening to her own ragged breathing. Then something warm stirred inside her. Not the phantom ache of the severed bond. Lower, deeper. A faint pulse, golden and insistent, like sunlight trapped in amber. Avalon pressed one numb hand to her abdomen. Beneath the thin, frozen linen, the warmth answered. Small, steady, alive. A child. His child. The realization crashed through her like a second storm. She curled tighter around herself, protecting that fragile spark with every inch of her body. Tears came then, hot and unstoppable, freezing almost as soon as they left her eyes. She wept silently, shoulders shaking, until the sobs turned to quiet, shuddering breaths. "I won't let you die here," she whispered to the life inside her. Her voice cracked on the wind, barely audible even to herself. "I swear it. Whatever it takes." The promise anchored her. She pushed herself up on shaking arms. Snow cascaded off her back in glittering curtains. Her legs trembled when she stood, but they held. She took one step, then another, down into the valley, toward the dark pines that promised, at the very least, shelter from the worst of the gale. The trees were ancient, twisted by decades of wind into grotesque shapes. Their needles were coated in rime, branches heavy with ice that clinked softly as the wind moved through them. Avalon ducked beneath the lowest boughs of the largest pine, crawling on hands and knees until she reached the dry space beneath the trunk where snow had not reached. The ground here was carpeted with brown needles that smelled faintly of resin and earth. She huddled against the trunk, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around her shins. The tree's bulk cut the wind to a low moan. It was not warm, not even close, but it was shelter. She closed her eyes. Sleep came in fits, shallow and haunted. Dreams flickered behind her lids, Braxos lifting the chalice, the wine spilling like blood. The high priestess's face contorted in protest. Lord Vesper's thin smile as the vial was presented, the palace doors slamming shut. And beneath it all, the golden pulse inside her, steady as a second heartbeat. She woke to silence. The storm had passed. Dawn light filtered through the pine needles in pale, watery shafts. The world outside her shelter glittered, every surface coated in fresh, untouched snow that reflected the rising sun in blinding white. The air was still, almost reverent, the kind of quiet that follows violence. Her body screamed when she moved, muscles stiff, joints locked, skin raw where the shift had chafed. Her feet were swollen, the cuts from ice crusts crusted with frozen blood. She peeled the linen away from one sole and hissed at the sight, deep gashes, already inflamed. No time for despair. She crawled out from under the tree. The cold hit her again, fresh and vicious, but the wind had died. She could think now. She needed fire, shelter, food. Water she could melt from snow, but fire first. Her eyes scanned the valley. A fallen branch lay half-buried a dozen yards away, thick enough to break into kindling. She staggered toward it, each step sending fresh pain up her legs. When she reached it, she dropped to her knees and began snapping smaller twigs free with numb fingers. She worked slowly, methodically. Gather. Pile. Clear a small patch of ground down to frozen earth. She had no flint, no steel, but she remembered the old trick her grandmother had taught her. Friction. She selected the straightest, driest stick she could find, shaved one end to a point with a sharp rock, then carved a small notch into a flat piece of wood. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the rock twice. Each time she cursed under her breath and started again. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. The sun climbed higher. Her stomach growled, a hollow ache that joined the chorus of pain. Thirst burned her throat. She scooped snow into her mouth, letting it melt slowly, knowing too much at once would drop her core temperature further. Finally, miraculously, a thin wisp of smoke rose from the notch. She leaned close, cupping her hands around the ember, blowing gently. The ember brightened, caught on a shred of dry inner bark she had teased from the pine. She fed it twigs, then larger sticks, nursing the flame until it crackled and snapped. Fire. She wept again, silently, as heat kissed her palms for the first time in what felt like forever. She sat close to the small blaze, feeding it carefully, letting warmth seep back into her limbs. Feeling returned in painful waves, pins and needles, then burning, then blessed relief. She stretched her hands toward the flames, watching the glow play across her skin. The golden spark inside her pulsed again, stronger now, as though it sensed safety. Avalon placed both hands over her abdomen. "I'm going to keep you alive," she whispered, "no matter what." She stayed by the fire until the sun reached its zenith, then higher still. When the light began to slant westward, she knew she could not remain here. The storm might return. Predators would scent her soon enough. Bears, wolves, the great white cats that hunted the tundra. She needed to move. She fashioned crude shoes from strips of her shift, torn into long ribbons and wrapped around her feet, padded with pine needles. It was pitiful protection, but better than nothing. She broke more branches, bundling them under one arm for future fires. Then she stood. The valley stretched north and east, toward the heart of the wasteland. Somewhere out there were rumors of rogue packs, outcasts who had survived where no one else could. If she could find them. She took a breath that tasted of smoke and cold. Then she walked. The sun sank lower, painting the snow in shades of rose and gold. Shadows lengthened, turning drifts into sculpted waves. Her pace was slow, agonizingly slow, but steady. Each step was a victory. Night fell. She built another fire in the lee of a boulder, smaller this time, feeding it sparingly. She curled around it, using her own body to shield the flames from the rising wind. Sleep came hard, broken by shivers and the constant awareness of the vast emptiness around her. She dreamed of golden light blooming behind her eyes, warm and fierce, like a tiny sun trapped beneath her skin. When morning came, gray, overcast, threatening snow, she rose again. She walked. Days blurred. Hunger became a constant companion, gnawing and relentless. She found a frozen stream, chipped ice with a rock until she could melt enough to drink. She chewed pine needles for the faint vitamin taste, knowing it was not enough. Her body began to feed on itself, muscle wasting, strength ebbing. Yet the golden spark grew brighter. She talked to it sometimes, in the long silences between footsteps. "You're strong," she murmured, "stronger than me. You'll make it." On the 5th day, or perhaps the 6th, she collapsed. She had been climbing a gentle rise, following the scent of something green beneath the snow, perhaps a buried patch of winter berries, when her legs simply gave out. She fell hard, face first into powder that filled her nose and mouth. She tried to push up. Her arms shook, then folded. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. She rolled onto her back, staring up at the iron-gray sky. Snow began to fall again, softly at first, then thicker. This is how it ends, she thought with strange calm. Then the golden light inside her flared, bright, insistent, almost angry. Not yet. Avalon's eyes snapped open. She clawed at the snow, dragging herself forward on elbows and knees. One agonizing inch at a time. Toward what? She didn't know. Only that stopping meant surrender. A shadow fell across her. She froze. Low growls rumbled through the wind, multiple voices circling. Wolves. She lifted her head. Eyes glowed in the swirling snow, amber, green, silver. Pelts dusted white with frost. A black wolf stepped forward, larger than the rest, ears pricked, nostrils flaring as he scented her. Avalon bared her teeth in a silent snarl, though she had no strength left to shift. The black wolf tilted his head. Then he shifted. A man stood where the wolf had been, tall, broad-shouldered, skin weathered to the color of old leather. His hair was iron gray, braided back with leather cords. Scars crisscrossed his bare chest and arms. His eyes were the same amber as his wolf's, sharp and assessing. He crouched beside her. "You smell of the palace," he said, voice rough as gravel, "and of the king's rejection." Avalon tried to speak. Only a croak emerged. The man, Thorn, she would learn later, studied her for a long moment. Then he reached down and lifted her as though she weighed nothing. "Bring her," he told the others. Darkness took her then. But not before she felt it. The golden spark inside her flare once more, bright and defiant. "Not yet," it seemed to say. "Not today." Chapter 3. Mercy of the Outcasts. Avalon woke to the scent of wood smoke and roasted meat. The aroma hit her like a physical blow, rich, fatty, savory, cutting through the fog of exhaustion and pulling her eyelids open with brutal insistence. For a heartbeat she lay still, body heavy as stone, unsure whether the smell was real or another cruel hallucination born of starvation. Then pain returned in full force, throbbing in her feet, burning in her lungs, an ache deep in every muscle that spoke of days spent fighting the cold. She was no longer outside. The air was warmer. Not warm, exactly, but blessedly still, and carried the faint tang of pine resin and damp fir. She blinked against dim light. She lay on a thick bed of furs spread over packed snow and evergreen boughs, inside what appeared to be a shallow cave carved into the side of a low cliff. The entrance was partially blocked by a heavy hide curtain that fluttered in the occasional draft, allowing slivers of gray daylight to slip through. A small fire burned in a ring of stones near the center, its smoke rising lazily to a natural vent high in the ceiling. Around her, shapes moved. Low voices, the soft scrape of boots on stone, the occasional low growl that was more conversation than threat. She tried to sit up. Her arms shook violently. She managed only to prop herself on one elbow before dizziness forced her back down. A shadow fell across her. The man from the storm, Thorn, crouched beside the firs, holding a wooden bowl that steamed gently. His amber eyes studied her with the same cool assessment he had given her in the snow. "You're awake," he said. It wasn't a question. Avalon's throat felt lined with sand. She swallowed once, twice. "Where?" "Rogue territory, deep in the wasteland, far enough from Eldoran that no one comes looking." He tilted the bowl toward her. "Eat. Slowly." Your stomach's shrunk. The broth inside was thick with chunks of meat. Dark, gamey, probably elk or caribou, and flecks of dried herbs. Fat glistened on the surface. Her mouth flooded with saliva so fast it hurt. She took the bowl with trembling hands. The first sip scalded her tongue, but she didn't care. Warmth spread down her throat, into her chest, uncoiling the knot of hunger that had twisted there for days. She drank in small, careful gulps, then chewed the tender meat pieces, tears pricking her eyes at the simple mercy of food. Thorn watched without comment. When the bowl was empty, she set it aside and met his gaze. "Why?" He raised one scarred brow. "Why what?" "Why save me? You could have left me to freeze, most would." Thorn leaned back on his heels, elbows resting on his knees. "You reek of the palace, of the king's scent, of rejection. That makes you interesting. And you carried yourself like someone who still wanted to live, even when death was easier. That makes you useful." He paused. "Or dangerous. We'll see which." Avalon pressed a hand to her abdomen instinctively. The golden spark answered, steady, warm, stronger now that nourishment had reached her blood. She didn't know if Thorn could sense it. Rogue alphas were unpredictable, their instincts sharpened by years outside pack hierarchy. "I'm no threat," she said quietly. "Everyone's a threat until proven otherwise." He stood in one fluid motion. "Rest. When you can stand without falling over, we talk." He left her then, ducking through the hide curtain into what sounded like a larger cavern beyond. Voices rose and fell, multiple wolves, perhaps a dozen, maybe more. Laughter, low and rough, the clink of metal, the soft thump of something heavy being dropped. Avalon lay back on the furs, staring at the rough stone ceiling. Exhaustion pulled at her again, but she fought it long enough to take inventory. Her shift was gone, replaced by a heavy wool tunic and trousers that smelled faintly of smoke and stranger. Her feet were wrapped in soft leather strips padded with moss. Someone had cleaned and salved the cuts while she slept. A water skin rested within reach, half full. They had not harmed her. Yet. She closed her eyes and let sleep claim her. When she woke again, the light through the curtain was dimmer. Late afternoon, perhaps. The fire had been built up. Heat radiated pleasantly against her skin. She tested her limbs. Pain lingered, but strength had returned in small measure. She pushed herself upright, swung her legs over the edge of the furs, and stood. The cave spun once, then steadied. She took 2 careful steps toward the curtain, parted it, and stepped through. The space beyond was larger than she expected. A wide, natural chamber lit by several small fires spaced along the walls. Furs and woven mats covered the floor in patches. Crude shelves had been carved into the stone, holding tools, dried herbs, strips of meat smoking over low flames. At the far end, a narrow passage led deeper into the cliffside. She caught glimpses of more chambers, more movement. 7 wolves turned to look at her. 4 in human form, 2 men, 2 women, all scarred, all dressed in patched leather and fur. 3 remained shifted: a lean gray female, a stocky brown male, and a younger black wolf who watched her with wide, curious eyes. Thorn stood near the central fire, sharpening a bone-handled knife with slow, deliberate strokes. One of the women, a tall, wiry figure with short, cropped red hair and a jagged scar across her cheek, spoke first. "She walks. Miracles do happen." "Or stubbornness?" muttered the stocky man beside her. His voice carried a faint mountain accent. Avalon lifted her chin. "I'm grateful for the shelter. And the food." The red-haired woman snorted. "Gratitude's cheap. What we want is answers." Thorn raised a hand. The room quieted. He sheathed the knife and crossed to her, stopping just close enough that she could scent him. Pine, smoke, old blood, and something wilder, untamed. "Name." "Avalon Starfall." A ripple of recognition passed through the group. Whispers. One of the shifted wolves growled low. "You were to be queen," Thorn said. "Not a question." "I was to be rejected," she corrected, "in front of the entire court, then accused of treason, then exiled to die. And yet, here you are. Here I am." Silence stretched. The younger black wolf shifted suddenly. Human now. A boy no older than 16, skinny and sharp-featured, dark hair falling into bright green eyes. Did the king really break the bond in front of everyone? Avalon's throat tightened. Yes. The boy's face twisted. Anger, pity, something fierce. "Bastard." "Rafe," Thorn warned. The boy, Rafe, subsided, but his eyes stayed on her, burning. Thorn studied her for another long moment. "You carry his scent still. Faint, but there. And something else." His nostrils flared. "You're with child." The room went still. Avalon didn't flinch. "Yes." Murmurs erupted. The red-haired woman, Lyra, she would later learn, stepped forward. "His?" Avalon met her gaze without blinking. "Yes." Lyra's scarred lip curled. "Then you bring trouble. Royal trouble. They'll come looking for an heir eventually." "They think I'm dead," Avalon said. "And even if they learn otherwise, I won't go back." Thorn's expression remained unreadable. Words are wind. Actions matter. He turned to the group. "She stays. For now. She hunts. She works. She proves herself. If she betrays us, or if the king's dogs sniff her out, she dies by our teeth." No one argued. Lyra crossed her arms. "Fine. But she starts at the bottom. No special treatment for a fallen princess." "I was never a princess," Avalon said quietly. "I was an Omega from the outer villages. I know how to work." Thorn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good. You'll need to." He jerked his head toward the passage. "Come. See what you've joined." Avalon followed him deeper into the cliffside warren. The rogue pack lived in a network of connected caves and overhangs, all carved by ancient glaciers and expanded by wolf hands. There were storage chambers lined with dried meat and roots, a communal sleeping area warmed by a natural hot spring that bubbled from a crack in the floor, a training space where the stone had been worn smooth by countless paws. Weapons hung on racks: bone daggers, spears tipped with sharpened antler, short bows of yew and sinew. 15 wolves in total, Thorn explained as they walked. Outcasts, exiles, runaways. Some had fled cruel alphas, others had been banished for challenging rank. A few had simply chosen freedom over submission. No hierarchy beyond what survival demanded. Thorn led because he was strongest and oldest, but decisions were made together when possible. They emerged onto a narrow ledge overlooking a frozen ravine. Below, a small herd of caribou picked their way through wind-scoured snow, breath steaming in white clouds. Thorn pointed. "Tonight we hunt. You come. You prove you can keep up." Avalon looked down at the animals, then back at him. Her body still ached. Her feet still throbbed, but the golden spark inside her pulsed with something like anticipation. "I'll keep up," she said. He studied her again, longer this time. Then he nodded once. "Rest until dusk. Lyra will show you the armory. Choose a blade. If you can't fight, you'll at least bleed prettily." He walked away, leaving her on the ledge with the wind in her hair and the faint howl of distant wolves echoing up the ravine. Avalon placed both hands over her abdomen. The child answered, warm, bright, fierce. She smiled for the first time since the chalice shattered. "Not alone anymore," she whispered. The wind carried the words away, but the promise remained. Chapter 4: Birth of Golden Light. The months that followed blurred into a rhythm of survival and slow, deliberate rebirth. Winter deepened around the rogue pack's cliffside warren, the frozen wasteland locking itself into iron-hard silence. Blizzards came in waves, days of howling white fury that buried the ravine entrance in drifts taller than a standing wolf, forcing the pack to hunker in the deepest chambers, sharing body heat and stories around the hot spring's glow. Then came brief, brittle, clear spells where the sun hung low and pale, casting long blue shadows across the snow, and the pack hunted with desperate efficiency. Avalon hunted with them. At first she lagged, her body still weakened from exile, muscles atrophied from starvation, feet tender even after the cuts healed into pale scars. But she refused to be carried. She ran at the rear of the pack, lungs burning, legs trembling, forcing herself to match their pace through knee-deep powder. When they brought down caribou or the occasional moose that wandered too far north, she helped drag the kills back, shoulders straining under ropes of braided sinew, blood freezing on her gloves. Thorn watched her progress without comment. Lyra tested her constantly, sharp words, harder tasks, sudden sparring matches in the training cavern where stone walls echoed with grunts and the slap of flesh on flesh. Avalon learned quickly. She learned to read the wind's direction by the way snow drifted against rocks, to spot the faint depression of a buried trail, to shift faster in the cold without losing control of her wolf form. Her shifts were still clumsy compared to the rogue's effortless fluidity, but they grew smoother with each moon. And all the while, the child grew. Her belly rounded slowly at first, then more noticeably. The golden spark inside her became a steady glow she could feel even when she wasn't touching the swell. Warm, radiant, alive with a power that made the hairs on her arms stand up during full moons. The pack noticed. Whispers followed her through the caverns. "She carries light." The goddess marked that one. The pup will be alpha-born, no doubt. During the long nights when storms kept them inside, the rogues gathered around the central fire. Stories were told. Old tales of the first wolves, of the goddess who walked among them in mortal form, of golden heirs who had once united fractured packs. Rafe, the young black wolf, asked endless questions. Will the pup shift early? Will its fur really shine like the sun on snow? Avalon answered what she could, her hand resting on the growing curve of her abdomen. "I don't know," she admitted more than once, "but I know it's strong." Thorn never joined those circles. He sat apart, sharpening blades or checking weapons, but his amber eyes tracked her every movement. Once, when the others had drifted to sleep, he approached her by the dying fire. "You're not afraid," he said quietly. Not a question. "I was," she replied. "In the beginning. Now, fear doesn't change what's coming." He studied her swollen belly. "The king's blood runs in that child. Royal blood. Powerful. Dangerous. I know. If word reaches Eldoran, it won't." Her voice was steel. "I'll keep this pup hidden until it can protect itself, and if they come for us, they'll find more than one wolf waiting." Thorn's mouth curved. Just a flicker. "Good." Winter gave way to a grudging spring. Snow melted in rivulets that carved silver threads down the cliff face. The ravine greened in patches, stubborn moss, hardy lichens, the first pale shoots of tundra flowers pushing through lingering ice. The pack hunted leaner prey as the caribou migrated south, but fish returned to the thawing streams, and roots became edible again. Avalon's time drew near. She felt it in the way the golden light inside her pulsed brighter, more insistently. Contractions began as faint twinges during a hunt, sharp enough to make her pause mid-stride, hand pressing low on her belly. She hid the pain, finished the kill, helped haul the meat back. But by nightfall the twinges had become waves. She told no one at first. She slipped into the smallest side chamber, the one they used for birthing when the weather allowed privacy, and built a low nest of furs and soft moss. She breathed through the tightening bands, counting between them, willing her body to wait until the pack slept. It did not wait. The pains sharpened. She bit down on a strip of leather to muffle the first real cry. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the chill. The golden light flared so brightly she could see it through her closed lids, a soft, warm radiance that lit the stone walls in amber and gold. Footsteps. Lyra appeared in the narrow entrance, eyes wide. "You idiot! Why didn't you call?" Avalon managed a strained laugh. "Didn't want to wake everyone." Lyra knelt beside her, pressing cool hands to Avalon's brow. "Too late for that. Rafe's already fetching Thorn. The whole pack knows something's happening. The light's leaking out." Avalon gripped Lyra's wrist. "Stay, please." Lyra's scarred face softened. "I'm not going anywhere." The labor stretched through the night. The storm returned. Fierce, sudden, wind screaming down the ravine like 1,000 angry spirits. Snow lashed the cliff face. Thunder rolled even though no lightning flashed. Inside the chamber, the air grew thick with the scent of blood, sweat, and something sweeter, ozone and starlight, as though the goddess herself hovered close. Thorn came and went, bringing fresh water, clean cloths, a bowl of herbal tea that eased the edges of the pain. Rafe hovered at the entrance, green eyes huge, until Lyra shooed him away. The other rogues kept vigil in the main cavern, their low voices a steady murmur of encouragement and old birthing chants. Avalon pushed when the pains demanded it. She growled, she wept, she cursed Braxos's name in the darkest moments when exhaustion threatened to break her. But each time the golden light surged, reminding her why she fought. The final push came at the height of the storm. She bore down with everything left in her, muscles screaming, vision blurring, and felt the release. A cry pierced the wind, high, strong, furious. Lyra lifted the newborn, slick and perfect, and placed him on Avalon's chest. The pup was tiny, wrinkled, covered in a fine layer of golden down that shimmered even in the dim firelight. His eyes opened, piercing blue, bright as glacial ice, and locked on hers. The golden aura enveloped them both, warm and protective, chasing the chill from the stone. Avalon laughed through tears. "Hello, little one." She cradled him close, feeling his small heart beat against hers. The bond that had been severed with Braxos had reformed here, fiercer, purer, unbreakable. "What will you name him?" Lyra asked softly. Avalon looked down at the golden pup, already nuzzling against her, tiny paws kneading her skin. "Kyle," she whispered, "after the old word for light that endures." Thorn stepped into the chamber then, silent as shadow. He looked at the child, at the radiant fur, the steady blue gaze, and something unreadable flickered in his amber eyes. "The goddess has favored you," he said, "and cursed you, perhaps. This pup will draw eyes eventually." Avalon met his gaze without flinching. "Let them come. We'll be ready." Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the golden light burned steady and bright. Kyle nursed, small fists curled against her skin, and Avalon felt, for the first time since the chalice shattered, a fragile, fierce hope take root. She was no longer alone. She was mother. She was warrior. And she would protect what was hers with teeth and claws and every breath she had left. Chapter 5. Forged in Ice and Fury. 2 years passed like the turning of seasons in the wasteland. Slow, relentless, and unforgiving. Spring came late and left early, a brief flush of green across the ravine floor before summer's pale sun baked the earth hard and dry. Autumn painted the tundra in rust and gold, then winter returned with its familiar teeth, burying everything under white silence once more. The rogue pack endured, as they always had, moving between hidden camps when game grew scarce, trading furs and smoked meat with distant human trappers who asked no questions. Avalon endured with them. No, she thrived. The soft Omega who had once trembled in a midnight blue gown was gone, burned away in the crucible of exile. In her place stood a warrior lean and hard as the bone blades she carried. Her raven hair was braided tight against her scalp, threaded with small carved beads of antler earned for each successful hunt. Scars traced pale lines across her forearms, and one thin slash curved along her left cheekbone. A gift from a white bear that had wandered too close to camp the previous winter. Her emerald eyes, once wide with hope, now held the steady watchfulness of someone who had learned that trust was a luxury paid for in blood. She moved like the rogues now, silent on snow, swift in shift, lethal when cornered. Her wolf form had filled out with muscle, coat thick and black, with faint silver tipping at the guard hairs. When she ran, the pack ran with her, not ahead. And at her side always, growing faster than any pup should, ran Kyle, the golden child. He had shifted for the first time at 6 moons, far too early, under a full moon that bathed the ravine in silver. The pack had gathered instinctively, drawn by the flare of goddess light that poured from the nursery cave. Avalon had knelt in the snow, heart hammering, as her son's tiny human body blurred and reformed into a pup the color of fresh sunlight on untouched powder. His fur shimmered with an inner radiance that made the snow around him glow faintly, as though lit from beneath. His eyes, piercing glacial blue, had looked up at her with perfect recognition. From that night on, he was never far from her. By his second winter, he stood nearly as tall as Rafe at the shoulder, his golden coat thick and luxurious, his alpha aura already pressing against the edges of pack hierarchy like a storm building on the horizon. He learned quickly, too quickly. Thorn taught him to track by scent alone across featureless ice. Lyra taught him to fight with tooth and claw and cunning. Avalon taught him to listen to the land, to feel the subtle shift of wind that warned of blizzard, to read the stars when clouds hid the moon. But she also taught him gentleness. In the quiet hours when the pack slept, she held him in human form, golden curls wild around his small, fierce face, and told him stories. Not of palaces or kings, but of the outer villages where she had grown up, the scent of fresh bread from stone ovens, the sound of children laughing in summer meadows, the way the goddess spoke in the rustle of leaves and the cry of ravens overhead. She never spoke Braxos's name, not once. Kyle never asked. He didn't need to. He knew what he was. The pack revered him in their rough, practical way. They brought him the choicest cuts of meat, carved him tiny weapons from bone and antler, told exaggerated tales of his future conquests around the fire. But they also disciplined him, sharply, when his alpha instincts flared too hot. Thorn, in particular, never hesitated to pin the golden pup by the scruff and growl until Kale submitted. "Power without control is death," Thorn told him after one such lesson, voice like grinding stone. "Remember that, little son." Kyle remembered. Avalon watched it all with a mother's fierce pride and a constant, low-burning fear. Every full moon, when Kyle's aura flared brightest and his golden fur seemed to drink the moonlight, she felt the danger grow. Rogue packs were not the only wolves in the wasteland. Rumors drifted north on the wind, of royal scouts pushing farther than ever before, of rewards offered for word of a golden pup, of the Alpha King himself riding out in winter campaigns that had nothing to do with border defense. She trained harder. Dawn often found her in the training cavern, sweat-slick and breathing hard, practicing forms with a bone-handled dagger until her muscles trembled. Lyra sparred with her most often, their blades clacking in rapid exchanges that echoed off stone. When Lyra tired, Thorn took her place, silent, relentless, forcing Avalon to push past exhaustion into the cold clarity that came after. One spring morning, after a particularly brutal session that left her bruised and bleeding from a split lip, Thorn tossed her a water skin and sat beside her on the cavern floor. "You fight like someone expecting war," he said. "I am," she replied, wiping blood from her mouth. He studied her for a long moment. "The king will come eventually. You know that." Avalon's fingers tightened around the water skin. "Let him." "And when he sees the boy?" She met Thorn's amber gaze without flinching. "He'll see what he threw away, and he'll learn what it costs to try taking it back." Thorn's scarred mouth curved faintly. "Good." That summer brought the first real test, a rival pack. Larger, crueler, led by an alpha named Gorath whose name was spoken only in curses, pushed into rogue territory seeking new hunting grounds. They were starving, driven north by drought in the south, and they took what they wanted. Smaller rogue bands fell before them. Word reached Thorn's pack on the wings of a wounded runner. Gorath's wolves were 3 days out and moving fast. The pack prepared. They sharpened weapons, cached extra meat, scouted escape routes into the deeper ice fields. Avalon worked alongside them without pause, her hands steady as she fletched arrows and reinforced shelter walls with packed snow. Kyle, now tall enough to look her in the eye in human form, helped carry supplies and listened to every strategy session with intense concentration. The night before the rival pack arrived, Avalon found him on the ledge overlooking the ravine, staring south. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "Are you afraid?" she asked quietly. Kyle considered the question seriously, golden curls falling across his forehead. "No," he said at last, "but I'm angry." "At them?" "At him." Kyle didn't need to say the name. "For making us hide, for making you sad." Avalon's heart twisted. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. He let her, though he was already too big for it. "I'm not sad anymore," she said. "I have you. I have the pack. That's enough." Kyle leaned into her. "It's not fair." "No," she agreed, "but fair is something we make ourselves." They sat in silence until the moon rose, silvering the snow below. The attack came at dawn. Gorath's pack poured into the ravine like a black tide, 25 wolves to their 15, lean and desperate and vicious, the air filled with snarls and the copper scent of first blood. Avalon shifted mid-leap from the ledge, landing among the invaders in a flurry of black fur and fury. She fought with a ferocity that startled even Thorn, tearing, slashing, driving enemies back from the nursery cave where the youngest pups had been hidden. Kyle fought beside her. His golden form was a beacon in the chaos, drawing eyes and attacks. He met them without hesitation, jaws closing on throats, claws raking across flanks. His alpha aura flared bright enough to cast shadows, pressing weaker wolves to their bellies even as they tried to strike. The battle was brutal and short. When it ended, Gorath's pack fled south, leaving 8 bodies cooling on the snow. The rogues lost 2, old Marta and young Silas, and mourned them with quiet howls under the rising sun. Avalon stood panting amid the carnage, blood matting her black fur. Kyle limped to her side, a long gash across one golden shoulder already clotting. She nosed him gently, checking for worse wounds, then shifted back to human form and pulled him into her arms. "You fought well," she whispered against his curls. "So did you," he mumbled into her shoulder. Thorn approached, human again, his left arm hanging limp and bloody. He looked at the golden pup, then at Avalon. "They'll hear of this," he said. "A golden alpha pup who fights like a warrior born. Word will reach Eldarin within the moon." Avalon straightened, holding Kyla close. "Then we'll be ready." That night, around the victory fire, the pack sang old songs of defiance and survival. Rafe played a bone flute, its reedy notes carrying into the cold stars. Lyra passed a skin of fermented berry wine that burned going down and warmed from within. Avalon sat with Kyle asleep against her side, his golden head heavy on her thigh. She stared into the flames and felt the familiar hardening in her chest. Not fear, not anymore, but resolve forged in ice and fury. She had survived the king's rejection. She had survived the wasteland. She had birthed and raised a golden heir in secret. Let Braxos come. Let him see what his betrayal had created. She would be waiting. And this time, she would not break. Chapter 6. Echoes in the Palace Halls. The Palace of Eldoran had never felt so empty. Braxos Bone Carver sat alone on the high throne of black granite and gold, the same seat where he had once lifted the chalice and severed the mate bond with a single sentence. Moonlight streamed through the tall, stained glass windows, painting the marble floor in fractured patterns of silver and shadow. The hall, so crowded and alive on the night of the bonding ceremony, now echoed with nothing but the distant drip of melting ice from the eaves outside and the occasional crackle of the great hearth fires that never quite warmed the vast space. He had not slept properly in months, not since the storm had taken Avalon. At first, he had told himself it was necessary. The kingdom demanded strength, and Omega, however fated, could not stand beside him on the throne without inviting whispers of weakness. Lord Vesper's counsel had seemed reasonable then. Better to reject her publicly, decisively, than to let the court see cracks in the king's resolve. Better to exile her quietly than to risk rebellion over a mate who could never match his power. He had believed the lie, for a time. Now the throne felt cold beneath him, the weight of the crown heavier than iron. He rubbed the place over his heart where the bond had once lived, a dull, constant ache that no healer could touch. The golden thread had been severed, but its ghost lingered, tugging at him in quiet moments like a half-healed wound that refused to scar. He rose abruptly, cloak swirling behind him, and strode from the throne room without a word to the guards who snapped to attention. They did not question where their king went at this hour. They had grown accustomed to his restless wanderings through the palace corridors, the way he paused at windows to stare northward toward the frozen wasteland, as though he could see through storms and stone to the woman he had cast out. His private chambers were no refuge. The bed, wide enough for 2, draped in sable and crimson, remained untouched most nights. Instead, he paced before the fire, boots wearing a path in the thick wolf pelt rug. Maps of the kingdom lay spread across the heavy oak table, marked with red ink where border skirmishes still flared, but his eyes kept drifting to the unmarked northern expanse. The wasteland. A blank white space on parchment, as though the cartographers had feared to name what lay beyond the last mountain pass. He poured a goblet of dark wine and stared into it, remembering the chalice that had shattered on the dais. The memory was sharp enough to cut. A knock at the door. Soft, hesitant. "Enter," he growled. Lord Vesper slipped inside, closing the door behind him with practiced silence. The advisor was thinner than he had been 2 years ago, his pale skin almost translucent under the firelight, eyes darting like a cornered hare. He bowed low. "My king, I bring news from the northern scouts." Braxos's grip tightened on the goblet. "Speak." Vesper cleared his throat. "There are whispers among the trappers and the border clans, tales of a rogue pack deep in the wasteland. Nothing new in itself. Outcasts have always clung to the ice, but this pack is different. They speak of a woman who leads with them, black-haired, green-eyed, a warrior who fights like no Omega they have ever seen." Braxos went still. Vesper continued, voice dropping to a near whisper, "And there is a child, a golden pup, born under a storm. His fur shines like sunlight on snow, even in darkness. They say he is Alpha-born, goddess blessed. The rogues protect him as they would their own heart." The goblet cracked in Braxos's hand. Wine spilled across his fingers, dark as blood. He did not seem to notice. See, so focused, trying to win her back, which will be impossible and make him vulnerable to attack. "Golden," he repeated, the word tasting of ash. Vesper nodded. "The description matches what might be expected, given the bond that was enough." Braxos's voice was low, dangerous. "You told me she was dead. You showed me the reports. The body found frozen near the pass. You said the ice had claimed her." Vesper paled further. "The scouts were certain. The tracks led into a crevasse. We assumed." "You assumed." Braxos stepped forward, towering over the smaller man. "And I believed you." "My king, Silence. Braxos turned away, staring into the fire. Flames danced in his amber eyes, reflecting the storm inside him. Guilt, long buried, now clawing its way to the surface, burned hotter than the hearth. He had rejected her. He had let them drag her away in chains. He had believed the accusations of treason without question, had allowed Vesper to present fabricated evidence while Avalon stood silent and proud, emerald eyes blazing with betrayal. And all the while, she had carried his child, a son, a golden son. The thought struck him like a blade between the ribs. He had an heir, goddess blessed, powerful beyond measure, and he had left mother and child to die in the frozen dark. "How long have these whispers been circulating?" he asked, voice rough. "Several moons," Vesper admitted. At first they were dismissed as trapper tales, exaggerations, but they persist. The golden pup is real. The woman, they call her the Ice Queen among the northern clans. She leads hunts. She trains warriors. She protects the boy like a she-wolf guarding her only cub. Braxos closed his eyes. Ice Queen. He could see her so clearly. Raven hair braided with frost, emerald eyes hard as glacial ice, body honed by survival into something lethal and beautiful. The soft, hopeful Omega he had rejected was gone. In her place stood a woman forged by his own cruelty, and she had done it alone, because of him. He opened his eyes. Summon the High Priestess. Vesper bowed and retreated. Minutes later, the ancient woman entered, robes of pale gray whispering across the stone, silver hair braided with raven feathers. She carried no chalice this time, only the quiet authority of one who spoke for the goddess. She stopped before the throne and inclined her head. "You called, my king." Braxos did not sit. He paced once, twice, then stopped before her. "I need the truth," he said. "No ceremony, no pretty words. Tell me what the goddess has shown you." The priestess studied him for a long moment, eyes ancient, unreadable. Then she spoke. "The bond was never truly severed. It was torn, yes, wounded. But the goddess's gifts do not break so easily. The thread still exists, faint and frayed, stretching northward into the ice. It pulls at you even now. I see it in your eyes." Braxos's breath caught. "And the child?" "A son, golden-furred, alpha-born. His aura burns bright enough to light the darkest nights. He is yours, Braxos Bonecarver, and he is hers. The goddess has marked him for greatness, but only if the three of you are made whole again." Braxos felt the floor tilt beneath him. He had thought the ache in his chest was regret. Now he understood it was longing, the mate bond, wounded but alive, calling him north. He turned to the priestess. "What must I do?" She smiled, small, sad, knowing. "You must go to them. You must face what you have done. You must earn what you threw away. The goddess does not grant second chances lightly. This one will cost you everything." Braxos nodded once. "Then I will pay." He dismissed the priestess with a gesture. When she had gone, he crossed to the table and swept the maps aside. In their place, he laid a single sheet of parchment, blank except for one word written in his own bold hand: Wasteland. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he began to plan. The next dawn found him in the armory, selecting weapons, not the ornate ceremonial blades of a king, but the practical, well-worn tools of a warrior. He chose a heavy cloak lined with white wolf fur for camouflage against the snow. He packed supplies for a journey that might take weeks: dried meat, fire-starting kits, ropes of braided sinew, a small tent of oiled hide. His guards protested when he announced he would ride north alone. "A king does not travel without escort." Captain Thorne, his most trusted commander, objected. "The wasteland is death even for prepared men." "I am not asking permission," Braxos said quietly. "I am going. If I do not return, the throne passes to my sister's line. You know the succession." The captain's face paled. "My king—" Braxos laid a hand on the man's shoulder. "Protect Eldoran. That is your duty. Mine lies elsewhere." He left at first light. The city gates opened for him without fanfare. No banners, no trumpets. Just one king on a sturdy black gelding, cloak drawn close against the wind, eyes fixed on the northern horizon. Behind him, Eldoran slept on. Ahead lay ice, storm, and the woman he had broken. And the sun he had never known. Braxos rode into the cold, and for the first time in 2 years, the ghost of the mate bond warmed. Chapter 7. The King's Descent. The first week of the journey north was almost merciful. Braxos rode through the familiar valleys of Eldoran's heartlands, where the snow lay thin and the roads were still passable. Villages greeted him with wary bows. Innkeepers offered warm beds and hot stew without asking his name, though their eyes lingered on the plain cloak and the absence of royal banners. He traveled light, one horse, one pack, weapons strapped close, and spoke little. The cold bit, but it was a known cold, the kind that numbed fingers but left the mind sharp. He welcomed the discomfort. It felt like penance. Beyond the last mountain pass, the land changed. The trees thinned to stunted pines, bent double by wind, then vanished altogether. The ground hardened into permafrost, cracked and uneven, forcing the gelding to pick its way with careful steps. Snow deepened from ankle-high drifts to knee-high walls that had to be broken through. The sky pressed low, gray and featureless, swallowing sound until the only noises were the crunch of hooves, the creak of leather, and Braxos's own steady breathing. He camped rough, small fires when he could find dry wood beneath the snow, otherwise cold bivouacs wrapped in his cloak and oiled hide. He ate sparingly, dried elk strips, hard cheese, nuts traded from a trapper 3 days back. Water came from melted snow scooped into his canteen, boiled over whatever flame he could coax from damp tinder. Sleep came in snatches, haunted by dreams of green eyes and a shattered chalice. In the worst of them, Avalon stood before him in the grand hall, belly swollen with child, and asked only one question. Why? He woke each time with the word lodged in his throat like a stone. The bond, faint, frayed, grew warmer the farther north he rode. Not the bright golden thread of old, but a dull ember that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. It tugged him onward like a compass needle finding true north. He followed it without question. On the 10th day, the first true storm hit. It came without warning, a low moan rising to a scream as wind tore down from the pole. Snow fell sideways, thick and blinding, stinging exposed skin like needles. Braxos dismounted, tied the gelding's reins to his belt, and led the horse forward into the white wall. Visibility dropped to arm's length. The world narrowed to the next step, the next breath. He lost the trail within an hour. Panic flickered, then died. He had known this might happen. He pressed on, using the faint pull of the bond as his only guide. The horse stumbled once, nearly dragging him down. Braxos soothed it with a low voice, stroking the sweating neck until the animal steadied. Night fell, or what passed for night in the endless gray. He found shelter in the lee of a boulder taller than 2 men standing, dug a shallow trench in the snow, lined it with his cloak, and curled around the horse for shared warmth. The wind howled like a living thing, seeking cracks in his defenses. He lay awake most of the night, listening to the storm rage, feeling the ember in his chest flicker, but never go out. Dawn, if it could be called that, brought a grudging lull. The wind dropped to a low moan. Braxos rose stiff and aching, dug the horse free, and continued. Days blurred after that. He crossed frozen rivers whose ice groaned beneath his weight. He skirted crevasses that plunged into blue-black nothing. He killed a lone Arctic hare with a thrown knife when his supplies ran thin, skinned it with numb fingers, and roasted the meat over a fire of twisted dwarf willow. The meat was stringy, the fat meager, but it kept him moving. The bond grew stronger, hotter, until it felt like a second heartbeat thrumming against his ribs. He began to catch scents on the wind, pine smoke, wolf musk, something sweeter beneath it all. Jasmine, the same faint trace that had clung to Avalon's skin the night of the ceremony. He was close. On the 17th day, or perhaps the 18th, he had lost count. He crested a low ridge and looked down into a narrow ravine. Below lay a hidden encampment. Caves honeycombed the cliff face, entrances shielded by heavy hides and banks of snow. Thin trails of smoke rose from vents. Figures moved between them, wolves in human form carrying bundles of firewood, others in fur-hauling sleds loaded with meat. A training circle had been cleared in the center of the ravine floor. 2 figures sparred there, blades flashing in the weak sunlight. And then he saw her. Avalon stood on a ledge halfway up the cliff, arms crossed, watching the sparring below. Her black hair was braided tight, silver beads glinting in the strands. She wore fitted leather armor reinforced with bone plates, a heavy cloak of white wolf fur thrown back from her shoulders. Scars traced her exposed forearms, marks of battles won. Her posture was straight, unyielding, the stance of a warrior who had earned every inch of ground she held. Braxos's breath caught. She was more beautiful than he remembered, fiercer, harder, forged into something unbreakable. Beside her stood a boy. Golden curls framed a small, fierce face. He was perhaps 7 or 8 in human years, but his build spoke of accelerated growth, tall for his age, already hinting at the powerful frame he would carry as an adult. His eyes, piercing blue, scanned the ravine with the same watchful intensity as his mother's. Even from this distance, Braxos felt the boy's aura, golden, radiant, alpha strong. It pressed against him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. His son. The realization struck like a physical blow. Braxos gripped the ridge rock until his knuckles whitened. Below, Avalon turned suddenly, as though she had felt his gaze. Her emerald eyes swept the opposite ridge, narrowed, searching. Braxos ducked lower, heart hammering. She stared for a long moment, nostrils flaring as though scenting the wind. Then she shook her head, almost imperceptibly, and turned back to the boy, laying a hand on his shoulder. Braxos exhaled slowly. He had found them. Now came the harder part. He waited until dusk, when the pack gathered around central fires for the evening meal. Shadows lengthened across the ravine, turning snow to indigo. He led the gelding down a narrow game trail he had scouted earlier, moving silently, keeping to the darkest edges. When he reached the ravine floor, he left the horse tethered in a copse of stunted pines and approached on foot. The first sentry, a lean gray wolf in human form, stepped from the shadows before Braxos had gone 20 paces. "Stop!" Braxos raised empty hands. "I come alone, unarmed." A lie. He carried blades, but he made no move toward them. The sentry's eyes narrowed. "You smell of the south, of the palace." "I am the palace," Braxos said quietly. "Tell Thorn I wish to speak with Avalon. Tell her. Tell her Braxos Bonecarver has come to face what he broke." The sentry stared at him for a long heartbeat. Then he shifted, gray fur rippling, and bolted toward the caves with a sharp warning howl. Moments later, the ravine came alive. Wolves poured from the entrances, some shifted, some human, forming a loose circle around him. Thorn stepped forward first, black fur bristling, amber eyes burning. "You have courage coming here," the rogue alpha said, voice like grinding stone. "Or foolishness." "Both, probably," Braxos replied. Lyra flanked Thorn, scarred cheek twisting in a sneer. Rafe hovered at the edge, green eyes wide with fury. Others growled low, hackles raised. Then the circle parted. Avalon walked through. She had not shifted. She did not need to. Her presence alone commanded silence. She stopped 10 paces from him, emerald eyes locked on his face. No warmth, no welcome, only cold, steady assessment. Braxos felt the weight of 2 years of regret crash down on him all at once. "Avalon?" he said. His voice cracked on her name. She tilted her head. "You look older. You look stronger." A ghost of something, pain perhaps, flickered in her eyes, then vanished. "Why are you here?" He took 1 step forward. The pack tensed. Thorn growled warningly. Braxos stopped. "To see the truth," he said. "To face what I did. To beg forgiveness, if it can be given." Avalon laughed, short, bitter, without humor. "Forgiveness?" she repeated. "You think words mend what you shattered? You think an apology erases the nights I nearly froze, the days I starved, the labor I endured alone in a blizzard while your kingdom feasted?" Each word struck like a lash. Braxos did not flinch. No, words changed nothing. "But I am here. Not as king, not as conqueror. as a man who was wrong. Who knows he was wrong? Who will do whatever it takes to make it right? Her gaze flicked to the boy who had stepped up beside her. Kyle stared at Braxos with those piercing blue eyes, curious, wary, unafraid. The golden aura around him flared softly like sunlight breaking through clouds. Braxos's throat closed. He dropped to one knee in the snow. The pack stilled. "I am your father," he said to the boy, voice rough with emotion. "I did not know you existed until days ago, but I know now, and I swear on my blood, on the goddess who marked you, I will protect you both, if you will allow it." Kyle looked up at Avalon. She did not move, did not speak. After a long silence, she said, "You may stay, on the edges. You hunt with us. You work with us. You earn nothing more than that until I decide otherwise." She turned away, taking Kyle's hand. "Thorn," she said, without looking back. "See that he doesn't freeze tonight. Beyond that, he's on his own." Braxos remained kneeling as the pack dispersed, leaving him alone in the snow. The bond pulsed, warm, wounded, alive. He rose slowly. He had found them. Now he would prove himself worthy, or die trying. Chapter 8. Firelight and Fury. The ravine settled into an uneasy truce the night Braxos arrived. No one welcomed him with open arms. No one offered him a place by the central fire. Thorn assigned him the smallest overhang on the eastern wall, a shallow scoop in the rock barely deep enough to shield one man from wind. A single fur was tossed at his feet, threadbare and smelling faintly of old smoke. Braxos accepted it without complaint, spread it over the frozen ground, and sat with his back to stone, watching the pack move through their evening routines as though he were invisible. He did not ask for more. He watched Avalon instead. She moved among her people with quiet authority, checking wounds from the day's training, distributing the last of the fresh-killed hair to the youngest pups, speaking low to Lyra about tomorrow's scouting run. Kyle stayed close to her side, golden curls catching the firelight, blue eyes flicking toward Braxos every few minutes with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Each time their gazes met across the flames, Braxos felt the bond pulse, warm, wounded, insistent. Avalon never looked his way. Not once. When the pack finally dispersed, some to sleep, some to take watch, Braxos remained seated, staring into the dying coals. The cold crept in slowly, seeping through leather and wool, but he welcomed it. Pain was honest. Pain reminded him why he was here. Footsteps crunched on snow. Thorn appeared, arms crossed, amber eyes reflecting the last embers. "You'll freeze out here," the rogue said flatly. "I've survived worse." Thorn snorted. "Not yet, you haven't." He jerked his head toward the main cavern entrance. "Come inside, not because I like you, because if you die of exposure on your first night, Avalon will think we killed you, and then she'll kill me." Braxos rose without argument. He followed Thorn through the hide curtain into the larger chamber. The air inside was warmer, thick with the scents of pine smoke, drying meat, wet fur, and the faint mineral tang of the hot spring deeper in the warren. Several small fires burned along the walls, their light dancing across scarred faces and patched furs. The pack had spread out, Rafe sharpening arrowheads near one blaze, Lyra oiling a bone dagger beside another, a few older wolves already curled in sleep. Kyle sat cross-legged near the central hearth, poking at the coals with a stick, golden aura flickering softly around him like captured starlight. Avalon stood at the far end, back to the entrance, speaking quietly with an elderly she-wolf whose hands trembled as she passed over a bundle of dried herbs. Braxos stopped just inside the threshold. Every eye turned to him, some hostile, some merely curious. Rafe's hand tightened on the whetstone, Lyra's lip curled. Avalon did not turn. "Sit where you won't be in the way," Thorn muttered, pointing to a patch of bare stone near the wall. "Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't touch anything that isn't yours. And if the boy approaches you, you answer honestly. No lies. No royal bullshit." Braxos nodded once. He crossed to the indicated spot and lowered himself to the ground, knees drawn up, cloak pulled tight. He kept his hands visible, palms open, a deliberate gesture of non-threat. The pack resumed their quiet activities, but the tension remained, thick enough to taste. Minutes passed. Then Kyle stood. He walked straight toward Braxos, small boots scuffing softly on stone. The golden glow around him brightened with each step, casting faint shadows behind him. The boy stopped 3 paces away and looked up, blue eyes steady, searching. "You're him," Kyle said. Not a question. Braxos swallowed. "Yes. You hurt her." The words landed like stones in still water. Braxos met the boy's gaze without flinching. "I did. More than you can imagine." Kyle tilted his head. "Why?" Braxos exhaled slowly. "Because I was afraid. Because I listened to lies instead of my heart. Because I thought strength meant standing alone. I was wrong." Kyle studied him for a long moment. Then he asked, "Are you still afraid?" "Every day," Braxos answered truthfully. "But not of you. Never of you." Kyle considered that. He took one more step closer. Close enough that Braxos could see the faint freckles across the boy's nose, the way his golden curls caught firelight like spun sunlight. "If you hurt her again," Kyle said quietly, "I'll kill you." The promise was delivered without heat, without bravado. Simply a fact, spoken by a child who already understood what it meant to protect what was his. Braxos felt something crack open inside his chest. "I would expect nothing less," he said. Kyle nodded once, small, decisive, then turned and walked back to his mother. Avalon had watched the entire exchange without moving. When Kyle reached her side, she laid a hand on his shoulder, bent to murmur something in his ear. The boy nodded, glanced once more at Braxos, then slipped deeper into the cavern toward the sleeping firs. Only then did Avalon finally look at him. She crossed the chamber in measured steps, stopping just outside arm's reach. Firelight carved sharp angles across her face, highlighting the scar on her cheekbone, the hardness in her emerald eyes. "You spoke to him," she said, voice low, controlled. "He asked. I answered. Don't lie to my son." "I won't." She studied him, long, searching. "You think one conversation changes anything?" "No." "Good." She turned away, then paused. "Tomorrow you hunt with the Dawn Patrol. Rafe leads. You follow orders, you carry your weight, you bleed if necessary. If you falter, you're gone." Braxos inclined his head. "Understood." She walked away without another word. He did not sleep that night. Dawn came cold and clear. The patrol assembled before first light. Rafe at the head, 4 others including Lyra, and Braxos at the rear. No one spoke to him as they shifted. Gray, brown, black fur rippling into place. Braxos shifted last, copper-red wolf towering over most of them, amber eyes glowing in the dimness. Rafe gave him one hard look, then led them out. They ran north along the ravine rim, noses to the wind, seeking fresh scent trails. The snow was crusty underfoot, the air sharp enough to burn lungs. Braxos kept pace without effort. His royal training had included endurance runs through far harsher terrain, but he stayed back, letting the rogues set the rhythm. They found sign near midday. A small herd of caribou, stragglers separated from the main migration. The patrol fanned out, silent as ghosts. circling wide to drive the animals toward a narrow choke point between two ridges. Braxos took the left flank as directed. When the herd bolted, he surged forward. Powerful strides eating distance, jaws open, driving the panicked beasts straight into the trap. Rafe and Lyra struck from the front. The others closed the sides. Braxos leaped onto the lead bull's haunch, fangs sinking deep, bringing it down in a spray of snow and blood. The kill was clean. The pack fed quickly, tearing into warm flesh. Rich fat coating muzzles, then dragged the remainder back toward the ravine on improvised sleds fashioned from branches and hide. Braxos pulled more than his share, shoulders straining under the ropes, legs burning from the deep snow. No one thanked him. No one needed to. He had done what was asked. That night he sat again by the wall, blood still crusting his muzzle in wolf form until he shifted back and wiped it away with snow. The pack ate around the fires, quiet, satisfied. Kale darted between adults, collecting stories of the hunt, golden laughter cutting through the low murmurs. Avalon watched from across the chamber. When the fires burned low and most had curled up to sleep, she approached. She stopped before him, arms crossed. "You didn't falter," she said. "I told you I wouldn't." She studied him, searching for weakness, for deceit. She found neither. "Tomorrow you mend the sleds, the ropes frayed. You work with Thorn. He doesn't trust easily. Neither do I." Braxos nodded. She turned to leave, then paused. "Why now?" she asked, voice softer than before, almost weary. "After 2 years. Why come now?" Braxos looked up at her, really looked, saw the shadows beneath her eyes, the faint tension in her shoulders that never quite eased. "Because I learned the truth," he said. "Because the priestess showed me the bond still lived. Because I saw your face in every dream and woke tasting regret. Because I have a son I never knew, and a mate I threw away like she was nothing. And because I cannot live with what I did another day." Avalon's expression did not soften, but something flickered in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or the ghost of old love. "Words," she said quietly. "Just words." She walked away. Braxos remained seated, staring after her until the last fire died to embers. The days stretched into weeks. He hunted. He mended. He hauled water from the spring when the upper pools froze. He sparred when challenged, holding back just enough to prove skill without dominance. He took the worst watches, the coldest posts, without complaint. Kyle approached him more often. Small questions at first. "Did you always live in a palace? Do you miss it? Why is your fur red like fire?" Braxos answered each one honestly, voice low, never pushing for more. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Kyle sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Do you love her?" the boy asked suddenly. Braxos's breath caught. He looked at Kyle, really looked, and saw himself in the fierce blue eyes, in the stubborn set of the jaw. "I never stopped," he said. Kyle nodded slowly. "Then prove it." He rose and walked back to his mother. Avalon had heard every word. She met Braxos's gaze across the dying fire. For the first time since his arrival, she did not look away immediately. The bond pulsed between them, stronger now, warmer, edged with something dangerously close to hope. But hope was fragile, and Avalon had learned, painfully, how easily it could shatter. She turned away. Braxos remained in the shadows, waiting, always waiting. Chapter 9. The Price of Humility. Weeks bled into one another in the ravine, each day a quiet test of endurance and restraint. Braxos did not ask for forgiveness. He did not demand acknowledgement. He simply worked. At dawn he rose before the others, breaking ice on the upper spring so fresh water could be carried down for the pups and elders. His hands, once accustomed to the smooth grip of a royal scepter, cracked and bled from the rough rope handles of the buckets, but he wrapped them in strips of hide and kept going. When the ropes frayed again, he sat for hours beside Thorn in the dim light of a side chamber, fingers moving methodically over twisted sinew, braiding new lengths stronger than before. Thorn said little during those sessions, only the occasional grunt of approval when a knot held firm under strain. "You tie like a man who's mended sails before," Thorn remarked one afternoon, watching Braxos's hands. "I tied my first knots on fishing boats in the outer harbors," Braxos answered without looking up, "before the crown found me." Thorn's scarred brow lifted slightly. Royal blood pulling nets. Hard to picture. "It was honest work," Braxos said simply. "I miss it sometimes." Thorn studied him a moment longer, then returned to his own braid without further comment. Braxos hunted with whatever patrol would have him, never leading, always at the rear unless ordered forward. He carried the heaviest loads back, haunches of elk slung over his shoulders, sleds piled high with frozen fish dragged through deep drifts. When a blizzard pinned the pack inside for 3 days, he volunteered for the midnight watch on the ledge, sitting motionless in the screaming wind while the others slept warm by the fires. Frost rimed his beard and lashes, his fingers turned blue beneath the gloves. He did not complain. He did not seek praise. The pack noticed. Not in grand gestures, rogues did not deal in sentiment, but in small shifts. Rafe no longer snarled when Braxos passed. Lyra stopped sharpening her dagger every time he entered a room. The older wolves began nodding to him in the mornings instead of turning away. They still watched him like hawks, still kept weapons close, but the outright hostility had dulled to wary acceptance. Kyle was the first to bridge the gap in earnest. It began with small things. One evening, the boy appeared beside Braxos's usual spot by the wall, holding a small bone carving. A rough wolf head, teeth bared, eyes narrowed in challenge. Kyle thrust it forward without preamble. "I made this," he said, "for the hunt yesterday. You took down the big bull alone when the others were pinned. Thought you should have something." Braxos accepted the carving carefully, turning it in his calloused hands. The workmanship was crude, but fierce. Clearly the work of small fingers learning patience. "It's strong," he said, "like you." Kyle shrugged, but his cheeks flushed faintly beneath the golden curls. "You can keep it, or throw it away. Doesn't matter." "I'll keep it." Braxos tucked the carving into the inner pocket of his cloak, close to his heart. "Thank you, Kyle." The boy lingered a moment longer than necessary, then darted back to Avalon's side. She had watched the exchange from across the fire. Her expression remained unreadable, but she did not call Kyle away. The next night Kyle returned, this time with questions. "How do you shift so fast?" he asked, sitting cross-legged a careful arm's length away. "Mine still takes forever sometimes, like my bones get stuck." Braxos considered how to answer without sounding like he was teaching, or worse, lecturing. "It's breath," he said at last, "not force. You feel the change coming like a storm building in your chest. Then you exhale and let it happen. Fighting it makes it slower." Kyle tried it right there. Eyes closing, small chest rising and falling. His form flickered once, golden light flaring, then settled back. He opened his eyes, frustrated. "Still stuck?" "It takes time," Braxos said gently. "You're already faster than I was at your age." Kyle looked at him sharply. "Really? Really? My first shift took half a night. I thought I'd be stuck as a pup forever." A tiny smile tugged at Kyle's mouth, gone almost before it appeared. He came back the next night, and the next. Questions turned to stories. The time Braxos had tracked a wounded elk for 3 days through a whiteout. the way the northern lights sometimes looked like rivers of green fire over Eldoran's mountains, how the palace cooks made honey cakes that tasted like summer even in deep winter. Braxos told them plainly without embellishment, letting Kyle decide what to believe. Avalon never interrupted these exchanges, but she always watched. One twilight, after a long day hauling timber down from the ridge to reinforce the outer shelters, Braxos sat alone on the ledge overlooking the ravine. Snow fell in soft, silent flakes that caught in his copper hair and melted on his lashes. His muscles ached in that deep, honest way that came from real labor. He welcomed it. Footsteps behind him, light, deliberate. Avalon stopped a few paces away, arms crossed against the chill. "You're good with him," she said, without preamble. Braxos did not turn. "He's easy to be good with." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hiss of falling snow. "Why are you doing this?" she asked at last. Voice quieter than the wind. "The work, the watches, the way you let them treat you like a stray dog who might bite. A king doesn't humble himself like this." "I'm not a king here," he said. "I'm a man who broke something irreplaceable. Humility is the least I owe." She stepped closer, close enough that he could scent her. Pine smoke, winter mint from the herbs she chewed to stay alert. And beneath it all, the faint jasmine that still haunted his dreams. "You think this pays the debt?" she asked. "No." He finally looked at her. Firelight from the caverns below gilded the scar on her cheek, turned her emerald eyes to deep forest pools. "Nothing pays it. I know that. I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. I'm trying to show you, and him, that I can be more than the man who walked away." Avalon's jaw tightened. "And if I never forgive you?" "Then I stay anyway," he said simply. "On the edges, helping where I can, protecting what's yours, ours, if you'll allow it. I don't need to be inside the firelight to do that." Something flickered across her face. Anger, grief, exhaustion. She looked away, out over the snow-filled ravine where the northern lights were beginning to stir in faint green ribbons across the sky. "I hated you," she said softly, "for a long time. Every night I lay awake cursing your name, imagining what I'd do if I ever saw you again. I wanted you to suffer the way I suffered. I wanted you to feel the cold, the hunger, the loneliness." Braxos said nothing. He let her speak. "I still feel it sometimes," she continued. "The anger. It's quieter now. But it's there." She turned back to him. "And then I see you with Kyle. I see you take the worst tasks without a word. I see you bleed for a pack that isn't yours. And I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything," he said. "Not yet. Not ever, if that's what you choose." She studied him, long and hard. Then she asked the question that had hung between them since the moment he knelt in the snow. "Do you still feel it? The bond?" Braxos placed a hand over his heart. "Every day. It's not bright like it was. But it's there. Warm. Pulling. Hurting. I don't think it will ever go away." Avalon exhaled, a slow, shaky breath that fogged the air between them. "I feel it too," she admitted. "I tried to kill it. I tried to bury it under ice and fury. But it's still there, like a splinter I can't reach." She turned away again, staring at the auroras. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Braxos. I don't know if I want to. But I'm not sending you away. Not tonight." She walked back toward the caverns without another word. Braxos remained on the ledge, snow gathering on his shoulders, watching the green lights dance across the sky. For the first time in 2 years, the ache in his chest felt less like punishment and more like possibility. Small, fragile, dangerous, but there. He stayed on the ledge until the cold forced him inside. When he entered the main chamber, the pack had mostly settled. Fires burned low. Kyle was already asleep, curled in a nest of furs near Avalon. She lay awake, eyes open, watching the embers. Their gazes met across the dim space. Neither spoke. But for the first time since his arrival, she did not look away first. Braxos took his usual place by the wall, wrapped himself in the thin fur and closed his eyes. The bond pulsed between them. Steady now, like a heartbeat they shared across the firelit dark. He did not sleep. Neither did she. But neither did they turn away. Chapter 10. Blood on the Aurora. The auroras came early that winter, great shimmering curtains of green and violet that spilled across the night sky like spilled ink from a goddess's quill. They danced in silent waves, pulsing brighter with each gust of wind that swept down the ravine, turning the snow below into a living canvas of shifting color. The pack watched from the ledges and cavern mouths, faces tilted upward, breath fogging in the cold. Even the most hardened rogues paused their tasks to stare. There was something sacred in the lights, something that reminded them they were small beneath the vastness. Avalon stood on the highest outcrop with Kyle beside her, his small hand tucked into hers. The boy's golden aura flickered in response to the auroras, soft pulses of light that mirrored the sky's rhythm. She felt the wonder in him, the awe that still lived beneath his growing fierceness. And for a moment the weight of 2 years lifted from her shoulders. Then the wind changed. It carried a new scent. Foreign wolves, many of them, sweat and hunger and malice rolling in from the south like a storm front. Avalon's spine straightened. She scented blood already, old blood, dried on fur, and the sharp copper tang of intent. "Rafe," she called down softly. "Alert the others. We have company." The pack moved with practiced speed. Fires were banked low. Pups and elders were herded deeper into the caverns. Weapons were drawn from racks. Bone daggers, short spears, bows strung with sinew. Braxos appeared at the cavern mouth, cloak thrown back, amber eyes scanning the darkness beyond the ravine rim. He carried no royal insignia, only the plain steel blade at his hip and the bone knife he had earned mending sleds. Thorn joined them on the ledge, nostrils flaring. "Gorith's pack again. Bigger this time. They've brought allies. Maybe 30, maybe more. They're not here for territory. They want the boy." Avalon's hand tightened on Kyle's. "They won't have him." Kyle looked up at her, blue eyes steady. "I can fight, Mama." "You stay back," she said firmly. "Protect the little ones inside. That's your job tonight." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it at the steel in her voice. He nodded once and slipped down the path toward the nursery cave. The first howls came then, low, challenging, rolling up the ravine like thunder. Shadows moved along the opposite ridge, dark shapes against the aurora-lit snow, eyes glinting green and yellow in the unnatural light. Gorath stepped forward at the center, a massive gray wolf, scarred across the muzzle, one ear torn half away. His alpha aura pressed outward, heavy and sour, testing the air. Behind him his pack fanned out, lean, battle-worn, driven by starvation and greed. Gorath shifted to human form, voice carrying across the ravine like gravel under boots. "Ice Queen, we've heard the tales. A golden pup who shines like the sun, a goddess-blessed heir. Hand him over and we leave your ragtag band in peace. Refuse, and we take him from your corpse." Avalon stepped to the edge of the ledge, voice ringing clear and cold. "You'll have to come through me first." Gorath laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "So be it." He shifted back and lunged. The battle erupted. Wolves poured down both sides of the ravine in a black tide. The auroras flared brighter overhead, bathing the snow in eerie green and purple as though the sky itself bled with the violence below. Snarls and yelps echoed off stone walls. Claws raked flesh, teeth sank deep, blood steamed on the frozen ground. Avalon shifted mid-leap from the ledge, black fur gleaming silver at the tips, emerald eyes blazing. She met the first wave head-on, tearing through a lean brown wolf, spinning to slash another across the throat. Lyra fought at her flank, red-furred and vicious, driving enemies back with snapping jaws. Rafe darted between legs, small and fast, hamstringing attackers before they could close. Braxos fought like a storm unleashed. His copper-red wolf form was massive, powerful strides carrying him into the thickest press. He took down two at once, jaws closing on one throat while claws raked another belly open. Blood sprayed across his muzzle, matting his fur, but he never slowed. When a trio of Gorath's wolves circled him, he roared, a sound that shook snow from the cliffs, and charged, scattering them like leaves. Gorath himself targeted Avalon. The gray alpha barreled through the melee, shouldering aside his own pack to reach her. They crashed together in a fury of teeth and claws. Avalon twisted, raking his flank. Gorath snapped at her shoulder, tearing fur and flesh. Pain flared hot and bright, but she used it, spinning inside his guard, sinking fangs into the thick muscle of his neck. He roared, shaking her loose, blood streaming down his chest. Above them, the auroras pulsed violently, greens bleeding into violent crimson as though the sky mirrored the slaughter below. Braxos saw her falter. A second wolf, larger, black-furred, lunged from the side, aiming for Avalon's exposed flank while Gorath pressed her front. Braxos surged forward, intercepting the black wolf mid-air. They rolled in a tangle of limbs and snapping jaws. The black wolf's claws scored deep across Braxos's ribs. Pain exploded white-hot, but he ignored it. He clamped his jaws around the attacker's throat and wrenched. Bone crunched. The wolf went limp. Braxos staggered up, blood pouring from his side, vision blurring at the edges. Avalon was pinned now, Gorath's massive paws on her shoulders, jaws wide for the killing bite. Braxos moved without thought. He launched himself across the snow, slamming into Gorath's side with every ounce of remaining strength. The impact knocked the gray alpha off balance. Avalon rolled free. Braxos followed through, driving his shoulder into Gorath's chest, forcing him back step by step toward the ravine wall. Gorath recovered, snarling, furious, and struck. His claws raked across Braxos's chest in a long, deep gash that split muscle and scraped bone. Blood fountained, dark and steaming. Braxos staggered but did not fall. He met Gorath's next lunge head-on, jaws locking around the gray wolf's foreleg. He twisted with brutal force. Bone snapped. Gorath howled in agony. Avalon was there then, black fur a blur as she leaped onto Gorath's back, fangs sinking into the scruff of his neck. Together they bore him down. Braxos pinned the thrashing legs. Avalon tore at the vulnerable throat. Blood sprayed across the snow in a wide arc, staining the aurora-lit white scarlet. Gorath's struggles weakened, then stilled. The gray alpha's body slumped, life fading from his eyes. The battle turned. Seeing their leader fall, Gorath's pack faltered. The rogues pressed the advantage, snarling, driving the invaders back up the ravine walls. Howls of retreat rose over the din. The surviving enemies broke and fled into the darkness, tails low, leaving their dead behind. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breathing of the wounded and the soft hiss of blood-melting snow. The auroras continued their slow dance overhead, indifferent. Avalon shifted back first, staggering to her feet. Blood streaked her face and arms, some hers, most not. She looked down at Braxos. He had not shifted. The copper wolf lay on his side in the snow, chest heaving, the long gash across his ribs gaping wide. Blood pooled beneath him, dark against the white. His amber eyes found hers, dimming, but steady. Avalon dropped to her knees beside him, hands pressing against the wound. Warm blood welled between her fingers. "Shift back," she ordered, voice cracking. "Now." Braxos's form blurred weakly. Human again, he lay pale and shivering, copper hair matted with sweat and blood. The gash was worse in skin, deep enough to expose ribs, edges ragged. Avalon pressed harder, trying to staunch the flow. "Thorn! Lyra! Bring cloths! Hot water! Anything!" Thorn appeared, grim-faced, tearing strips from his own cloak. Lyra ran for the caverns. Braxos's hand found hers, weak, trembling. "The boy, is he safe?" she whispered. "He's safe." Braxos exhaled, a shuddering breath. "Good." His eyes fluttered. The auroras reflected in them like dying stars. "Don't you dare," Avalon said fiercely, leaning close so her face filled his vision. "You don't get to die here. Not after all this." A faint smile touched his bloodied lips. "Wouldn't dream of it." His hand slipped from hers. Avalon felt the bond flare, bright, desperate, terrified. She pressed both palms to the wound, willing the golden light she had once felt during Kyle's birth to rise. It answered, slowly at first, then stronger. Warmth spread from her hands, golden threads weaving into torn flesh, knitting muscle, slowing the bleed. She poured everything into it: fear, anger, the stubborn ember of love she had tried so hard to kill. The bleeding eased. Braxos's breathing steadied. He did not wake, but he did not die. The pack gathered around them, silent, watchful. Kyle pushed through the circle, golden eyes wide. He knelt beside his mother, small hand resting on Braxos's shoulder. "Is he?" "He'll live," Avalon said, voice raw, "because he's too stubborn to do anything else." She looked up at the sky. The auroras had softened to gentle greens again, as though the violence had passed, and the night could breathe once more. Blood stained the snow in wide, dark pools, but beneath it all, the golden light still burned, faint, steady, refusing to go out. Avalon bowed her head over Braxos's still form, tears freezing on her lashes. For the first time in 2 years, she did not push the bond away. She let it stay. Chapter 11. Healing in the Frost. The auroras had faded to pale ghosts by the time the pack carried Braxos back to the main cavern. Snow still fell in soft, relentless curtains outside, muffling the world, but inside the air was thick with the copper scent of blood, the sharp bite of herbal poultices, and the low murmur of worried voices. They laid him on a thick bed of furs near the hot spring's edge, where steam rose in gentle curls and the stone floor radiated faint warmth. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. The long gash across his ribs had stopped bleeding freely thanks to Avalon's desperate channeling of golden light. But the wound remained ugly. Raw edges gaping, muscle torn, bone visible in places where claws had raked deepest. Avalon knelt beside him, hands still pressed to the injury, golden threads flickering weakly beneath her palms. She had poured more of herself into the healing than she ever had before. More than during Kyle's birth. More than in any desperate moment of survival. The light inside her dimmed with exhaustion, leaving her trembling, sweat beading on her brow despite the chill. Yet she did not lift her hands. Lyra worked beside her, silent and efficient, dipping clean cloths into a steaming bowl of water infused with willow bark, yarrow, and the last of their precious honey. She pressed the cloths to the wound's edges, cleaning away dried blood and debris. Thorn stood watch at the cavern mouth, arms crossed, amber eyes scanning the darkness for any sign that Gorith's survivors might circle back. Rafe hovered nearby, green eyes wide and frightened, clutching a small bowl of salve he had helped mix. Kyle sat on the far side of Braxos, knees drawn to his chest, golden aura dimmed to a faint glow. He had not cried. Not once, but his small hands trembled as he reached out and rested them lightly on his father's arm. The contact seemed to steady him. The golden light flared brighter for a heartbeat, as though the boy's touch answered his mother's. "He's strong," Kyle whispered. "He'll wake up." Avalon met her son's eyes across Braxos's still form. "He will," she said, voice raw but certain. "He's too stubborn to leave us now." She did not say the rest, that she had felt the bond flare in terror when the claws struck home, that the thought of losing him had torn something open inside her she had thought long sealed. She did not say that the anger she had nursed for 2 years had cracked under the weight of fear and gratitude. She simply kept her hands on the wound, feeding it what little strength remained. Hours passed. The pack took turns sitting vigil. Lyra changed the dressings when they soaked through. Thorn brought fresh wood for the fire, keeping the cavern warm enough that steam continued to rise from the spring. Rafe fetched water, brewed more tea, anything to feel useful. The wounded from the battle, 3 with deep bites, 1 with a broken foreleg, were tended in a side chamber, but no one complained about the attention given to the outsider. Not tonight. Near dawn, when the sky outside began to pale from black to bruised gray, Braxos stirred. A low groan escaped his lips. His fingers twitched against the furs. His eyelids fluttered, then opened, amber eyes clouded with pain and disorientation. Avalon leaned closer. "Easy. Don't move." Braxos blinked slowly, focus settling on her face. Recognition dawned, followed by something softer. Relief, perhaps, or wonder. "You're here," he rasped. "Where else would I be?" she answered, voice gentler than she intended. He tried to lift a hand toward her. The motion pulled at the wound. He hissed through clenched teeth. "Lie still," she ordered. "You nearly bled out. The goddess only knows how you're still breathing." "Stubborn," he managed, a faint echo of the smile she had seen on the battlefield. Kyle leaned forward then, small face fierce with worry and hope. "You saved her," he said. "You took the hit meant for her." Braxos looked at the boy, really looked. "I'd do it again," he whispered. 1,000 times. Kyle's lip trembled, but he did not cry. Instead, he reached out and placed his small hand over Braxos's larger one. Golden light flared softly between their palms. Warm, healing, instinctive. Braxos exhaled shakily. "Thank you, son." The word hung in the air. Simple, profound. Kyle's eyes widened, then filled. He did not pull away. Avalon watched them, throat tight. She lifted one hand from the wound, now closed to a raw, angry scar, and placed it over both of theirs. The 3 auras mingled, her steady emerald-tinged gold, Kyle's bright sunlit radiance, Braxos's deep amber flame. For the first time since the chalice shattered, the bond felt whole. Not perfect, not unbroken, but mending. She spoke quietly, so only they could hear. "I felt you die," she said. "For a moment. The bond flickered out. I thought—" She swallowed. "I thought I'd lost you before I ever let myself have you back." Braxos's eyes met hers, raw, unguarded. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything, for the rejection, for the exile, for every night you suffered alone. I can't undo it, but I can spend every day left trying to be worthy of this, of you, of him." Avalon searched his face, saw the truth there. No royal arrogance, no calculation, only a man stripped bare by regret and love. "I don't know if I can forgive everything," she admitted. "Not all at once. But I can't pretend the bond isn't there. I can't pretend I didn't feel it scream when you fell. And I can't pretend I want you gone." She leaned down, pressing her forehead gently to his. careful of the wound, careful of the fragile thing blooming between them. "Stay," she whispered. "Heal. Help us rebuild what Gorath tried to take, and we'll see. We'll see what comes after." Braxos closed his eyes, a single tear tracing down his temple into his hair. "I will," he breathed. "As long as you'll have me." Kyle shifted closer, curling against his father's uninjured side. "You're staying," he said firmly, as though declaring it made it true. "You're family now." Braxos's arm moved, slowly, painfully, and wrapped around the boy's shoulders. "Family," he echoed. The word settled over them like a blanket. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and silent, covering the bloodstains in the ravine with fresh white. Inside, the hot spring bubbled gently, steam rising in lazy spirals. The pack drifted in and out, bringing food, changing bandages, offering quiet words of respect, but they gave the three space. Avalon stayed beside Braxos through the day and into the next night. She fed him sips of broth when he could swallow, changed the dressings when blood seeped through, held his hand when fever rose, and delirium made him mutter apologies in his sleep. Each time he woke, her face was the first thing he saw. On the third morning, when the fever finally broke and color began to return to his face, she helped him sit up against a pile of furs. The scar across his chest was still livid, pink and puckered, but closed, the worst of the damage mended by her light and the pack's care. Braxos looked at her, really looked. "You saved me," he said quietly. "You saved us first," she replied. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I abdicate nothing," he said. "Not the throne, not the kingdom. But I offer it differently. I'll bring the rogues into council if they'll come. I'll open the borders to outcasts. I'll change the laws that let advisors like Vesper whisper poison. I'll make Eldarin a place where strength isn't measured by crowns alone." Avalon considered him. "And if I say no? If I say, we stay here, in the ice?" "Then we stay," he answered without hesitation. "I'll learn to hunt caribou and braid rope and sit watch in blizzards. I'll be whatever this pack needs, whatever you need." She studied him a long moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his forehead. Soft, brief, a promise, rather than a claim. "We'll decide together," she said. "When you can stand without bleeding, when the snow melts enough to travel south. Until then, rest, heal, be here." Braxos exhaled, a sound of profound relief. "I'm here," he whispered. Kyle climbed onto the furs between them, nestling against both. Golden light wrapped around the three of them, warm, protective, bright enough to chase shadows from the cavern walls. Outside, the first hints of dawn touched the ravine, turning snow to rose and gold. Inside, scars began to heal, not just flesh, but something deeper. The bond thrummed between them, stronger now, steadier, no longer a ghost, but a living thread. Avalon rested her head against Braxos's shoulder. For the first time in 2 years, she let herself hope. Chapter 12. Moonlit Vows Renewed. Spring came to the frozen wasteland slowly, almost shyly, as though it feared being chased away again. The snow retreated in patches first, dark earth appearing along the ravine floor like ink spilled on white parchment. Hardy tundra flowers pushed through the melt, small purple saxifrage, pale yellow Arctic poppies, their petals trembling in the uncertain wind. The stream swelled with runoff, gurgling over stones worn smooth by centuries of ice. The air lost its razor edge. It still bit, but now it carried the faint green promise of things growing. Inside the caverns, the pack felt the change too. Furs were aired out on rocks in the weak sunlight. Weapons were sharpened not for immediate war, but for the long hunts of warmer months. Laughter came easier. Rafe's flute played longer into the evenings, and even Thorn's scarred face softened when he watched the pups chase melting snowballs. Braxos healed. The scar across his chest remained, a thick, pale line that pulled when he stretched, a permanent reminder of the night he had thrown himself between Avalon and death. But strength returned day by day. He walked the ravine rim without limping. He helped haul timber for new shelters. He hunted again, never leading, always shoulder to shoulder with the others, bringing back caribou and mountain goats, whose meat filled the drying racks. Kyle shadowed him constantly now. The boy asked endless questions: how to throw a proper knife, how to read wind shifts on open ice, how the palace looked at sunrise when light poured through the stained glass like molten gold. Braxos answered each one patiently, voice low, letting Kyle decide how close to stand. Sometimes the boy leaned against his leg without thinking. Sometimes he pulled back. Remembering old wariness, Braxos never pushed. He simply stayed. Avalon watched them both. She watched Braxos carry water for the elders without being asked. She watched him sit with Thorn over maps scratched into flat stone, discussing trade routes south that might bring the rogues into Eldarin without bloodshed. She watched him kneel in the snow to teach Kyle how to build a proper fire pit, patient even when the boy's small hands fumbled the kindling. And she felt the bond. It had grown steady, warm, no longer frayed but rewoven, thread by careful thread. It thrummed in quiet moments, when their eyes met across a fire, when their hands brushed passing a water skin, when she caught him looking at Kyle with unguarded wonder. It no longer hurt. It simply was. One evening, when the sun lingered longer than it had in months and the sky turned the soft lavender of twilight, Avalon found Braxos on the high ledge overlooking the ravine. He sat with his back to a boulder, knees drawn up, staring south toward the distant mountains that guarded Eldoran. The wind lifted strands of his copper hair. The fading light gilded the scar on his chest where his tunic gaped open. He looked tired. Not the exhaustion of injury, but the deeper weariness of a man who had carried guilt too long. She approached without sound, settling beside him a careful arm's length away. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the ravine breathe, water dripping from icicles, distant wolf calls, the soft rustle of wind through new grass. Finally, she spoke. "The snow's melting enough to travel," she said. "We could reach the border passes in 2 weeks if we move light." Braxos turned his head to look at her. "We? If we go," she clarified. "If I decide the pack should see what lies south. If I decide Kyle should know the kingdom his blood claims." He nodded slowly. "And if you decide to stay?" "Then we stay." She met his eyes, emerald steady against amber. "But I think it's time to stop hiding." Braxos exhaled, a slow, careful breath. "What do you want, Avalon? Not what's safest, not what's strongest. What do you want?" She looked out over the ravine, at the caves that had sheltered her, at the pack moving below like family, at Kyle laughing with Rafe near a small fire. "I want to stop being afraid," she said quietly. "Afraid of the bond. Afraid of you. Afraid that if I let myself feel it again, it will shatter me like before." She turned back to him. "I want to choose. Not because fate demands it. Not because the goddess marked us. But because I choose you." Braxos went very still. She reached out, slowly, and placed her hand over the scar on his chest. Beneath her palm, his heart beat strong and steady. The bond flared warm between them, golden light flickering softly under her skin. "I choose you," she repeated. "Not the king, not the crown. You, the man who bled for us. The man who stayed on the edges until we invited him in. The man who never once demanded forgiveness, only earned it." Tears gathered in her eyes, hot, sudden, unashamed. Braxos covered her hand with his own. His thumb traced slow circles over her knuckles. "I love you," he said, simple, rough, honest. "I never stopped. Even when I was too blind to see it. Even when I broke everything. I love you, Avalon Starfall. And I will spend every day proving I'm worthy of the choice you're making." She leaned forward then, slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. He didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of salt and snow and second chances. Soft at first, tentative, almost reverent, then deeper, hungrier, as 2 years of longing and grief and hope poured through the bond like wildfire. Golden light flared around them, bright enough to cast shadows on the rocks, warm enough to melt the last lingering frost on their skin. When they parted, foreheads resting together, breath mingling in the cool air, Avalon smiled. Small, real, unguarded. "Take us home," she whispered. Braxos nodded against her. Together. 2 weeks later, the pack left the ravine. Not all of them. Some chose to stay, guarding the old ways, but many followed. Thorn and Lyra, Rafe and the younger fighters, the elders who wanted to see green valleys again. They traveled light. Sleds packed with furs and dried meat, weapons close, eyes sharp for trouble. Kyle ran ahead sometimes in golden wolf form, paws kicking up meltwater, aura shining like a beacon. Braxos walked beside Avalon, hand occasionally brushing hers, a quiet claim neither of them needed to speak aloud. They crossed the last mountain pass under a full moon. Below them stretched Eldoran, rolling valleys greening with spring, rivers sparkling like silver threads, the palace rising on its hill like a dark crown against the stars. The gates opened without challenge. Word had traveled ahead. Scouts sent by Braxos weeks earlier had prepared the way. No fanfare waited, no banners or trumpets. Only quiet respect as the pack entered the city streets. The people watched, some wary, some curious, many smiling when they saw the golden pup trotting proudly beside the black wolf and the red. In the grand hall, the high priestess waited alone. She smiled when she saw them, old eyes bright with knowing. "The goddess's thread holds," she said simply. Braxos stepped forward, Avalon at his side, Kyle between them. "We come to mend what was broken," he said, "to rule with strength and mercy, to welcome those who were cast out." The priestess inclined her head. "Then let it be witnessed." Under the same stained glass windows that had once seen rejection, they renewed the bond. No chalice this time, no ceremony of wine and runes. Only 3 hands joined, mother, father, son, golden light rising around them like dawn breaking. The bond sealed anew, bright, unbreakable, whole. The pack settled into new lives. Some in the palace guard, some in the outer villages, all with voices in council. Eldoran changed. Slowly, steadily, borders opened, laws softened, strength measured not by crowns but by heart. Years later, when Kyle was grown and the kingdom prospered under 3 rulers, king, queen, and golden heir, the frozen wasteland bloomed in patches. Flowers grew where ice once ruled. Stories spread of the Ice Queen who had become something more, of the king who had knelt in snow and risen worthy. And on quiet nights, when the auroras danced south, Avalon and Braxos stood on the palace balcony, hands entwined, watching the lights. The bond thrummed between them, warm, steady, eternal. Some bonds are shattered, some are reforged stronger, and some, when chosen freely, become unbreakable. If this story stirred something ancient in you, if you walk away carrying the echo of claws in the snow, fire in the dark, or love forged through loss, then you're already part of this world. Bookish After Dark is where forgotten myths rise again, where wolves, dragons, and dark kings claim their fate, and where love is never gentle, but always earned. Subscribe to stay with us in the firelight. More stories are waiting in the shadows.